it may be beyond your ambient, but the issue of biofuels and how that's the use of corn for ethanol. Has obviously increased the price of corn and caused people to change the crops they grow. And so the food prices are going up all over the world, and of course now because India and China are getting more wealthy, they're deciding to consume more meat, and as you know, that takes more grain to grow meat, and you can get the protein directly from the grain. It's a real mess. I mean, I would think in general that we shouldn't be using agricultural products for fuel, if they can be eaten. I mean, there's talk about developing ethanol from vegetable waste matter, right, like corn stalks and stuff. And obviously, if that could be done, that would be fine. Although there's problems that don't relate to agriculture about how much energy you have to put in to get the ethanol out, or whether you're really saving that much energy overall. But apart from that issue, so I think research should go on in these, but I think that we should discourage people using crops that can be eaten for biofuels.
In the process of evaluating small farms versus agribusiness, it is important to recognize the environmental and social benefits that small-scale family farms provide. These farms are more efficient in their use of land and represent diversity of ownership, cropping systems, landscapes, and biodiversity. Healthy, nutritious food from local and regional farms is being replaced by food grown with massive inputs of pesticides and chemical fertilizers transported over great distances. As family farms disappear as agribusiness moves in, rural communities are eradicated, creating major implications for the cohesion of the nation-state. The relationship between multinational agribusiness corporations and small-scale farmers is an intense power struggle, where capitalistic interests to maximize profits collide with traditional values and subsistence. This struggle and the effects of globalized agriculture is demonstrated through Asiag's case study in India. The rural farmers in India maintain practices and traditions that characterize the production of agriculture and their overall way of life. Linkages between families and farmers are enhanced by processes of conserving and selecting grain. Strong values of kinship and community are displayed as farmers cooperate to share and use the grain. The crop diversification, which is diminished by the presence of the agribusiness's monocrop, is critical for women to be able to satisfy food needs through varying menus. Economist Jagdish Bhagwati states that
in sub-Saharan Africa, the switch to export promotion crops has often diverted resources from domestic consumption. Men have controlled the extra cash earned from this strategy, and the nutritional status of women and children declined.
He goes on to explain that it is smarter to have income-enhancing policies go hand-in-hand with progressive social ones, which will be more likely to emerge and take hold if we empower women by providing them with the economic opportunities that a growing and prosperous economy will create, instead of reducing incomes so that they are divided and spent better for women. Asiag writes,
rural ethnography thus illustrates the powerful significance of seeds for several 100 million individuals as material and symbolic supports of continuity and of assured revival, the essence of life itself.
Therefore, the integration of markets and the onset of agricultural globalization has been extremely detrimental to the subsistence of the rural farmer. Farmers are forced to sell their land, and tragically, there has been an influx in suicides as farmers find themselves trapped in new forms of bondage, unable to pay the debts that continue to build in the new system.
Krishna Iyer concluded that seed racketeering has become a form of genocide which condemns rural farmers to pay with their lives for the profits made by the companies.
Says Asiag. In the face of agribusiness and the globalization of agriculture, it is important to recognize the need to democratize the system. There needs to be a crucial shift to a system based on sustainable production, conservation, and equal access to resources. These alternatives are already in place in many parts of the world. However, we must globalize these initiatives toward small farmer-centered agricultural systems that aim at food self-sufficiency and ecological sustainability. In order for this to occur, several changes need to happen. There needs to be a shift from external inputs to internal inputs, where agriculture becomes localized rather than globalized. There needs to be a rebuilding of local food security as the basis of national food security. This can be achieved if crop diversity prevails over the monocrop. Most importantly, however, there needs to be a shift from an obsession with dollars per acre to nutrition per acre. These initiatives will aid in rebuilding competitive markets, which stimulate sales of locally grown food and build farm cooperatives, which can compete for market share. The developed world also has an obligation to developing countries in rebuilding their markets. Again, we asked Professor Stephen Lee what the impact that globalization of agriculture had on food supply and hunger.
Well, I think we have an important moral obligation, not just a kind of obligation of charity to feed people who are hungry. And now, of course, we see this happening because of the increase in food prices, the food riots in Haiti, and so forth. And it's just really coming to a head. But I think the international economic rules of globalization are designed to help the better off countries. They have much more leverage in the negotiations and so forth. And so, because we really call the tune, the West calls the tune in terms of those rules, we have an obligation to change the rules in a way which would be more fair. So it's not a case of the less developed worlds not being able to produce what they need, right? It's a matter of our rigging the rules in a way which ensures that some of what they could have locally gets sent to us. They don't have as much as they need.
According to Stiglitz, the way to solve this transitional problem would be for the industrial countries to provide assistance to help the developing countries through the adjustment period. Even a fraction of what they now spend on agricultural subsidies would do. And we most certainly do hold responsibility for such impacts.
If you're just walking along the street and come upon someone that's hungry, right, it might be a nice idea if you gave them some money for food, and a lot of people would do that, but you don't really have an obligation to do that, most people would say, right? But in fact, if the person hungry in the street is due to our actions, if that person's hunger is due to our actions, then we clearly have an obligation. And that ties into this idea about the rules, international rules of the game, and how we're basically responsible for those because we have the great bargaining power of the negotiations. And so, that person on the street, that Haiti on the street hungry, right, is not just somebody that would be nice for us to help feed for charity, but somebody we have an obligation to